Talk and Tone with professional musicians, engineers, producers, and techs like myself all get together and discuss guitar tones. I'll be your host, Dave Pops Clements, and with me tonight is a very special guest. He's a very special friend of mine, Mr. Tariqh Akoni.
Absolutely.
How you doing, my brother?
Any better would be illegal.
I got to tell you, it's been a real struggle since you arrived here today because I'm just dying to drink, but you won't.
Exactly.
Life sucks now.
Dude,
I can't get anybody to have a drink with me. I've not had a drink in 6 weeks. I'm
What's
on
that about?
I'm on a water diet.
Dude, it's hilarious. I was just saying, it's like I've been doing the same thing, and I've been trying to like clean out, But we're both such wine fans, and so whenever I think of like I wish I had like a nice bottle of red I could bring over and we could just get in. So.
Oh man, I don't even know where to start. Actually, maybe some of your background. Tariqh and I. We've worked together.
Yes.
A
ton.
I'm a big fan of yours and everything you do as a musical director.
Oh, thank you, buddy. Thank you.
Your Berkeley background, you're the chart master.
Thank you, sir.
You're the cat. Previous to you, I was only hip to one other guy that could chart like you, and that was Scott Tunis.
Which is high praise. He's
that's
amazing.
crazy. And we're going to have Scott on one of the shows. He has agreed.
Yeah, right on. Oh,
so I can't wait to get him on.
I can't wait to watch it.
Yeah, that's going to be fantastic. And so we go back a ways. And as I was talking to Jeff earlier about our first tour that we did was a Christina Aguilera,
yes,
which really didn't feature your abilities in the least bit.
Right, yeah.
And neither did Guitar Tone. It really didn't matter.
Yeah.
It was about her, and it was and this was all live stuff, and what we're trying to get across is really studio techniques, but I am talking about live stuff because it is a part of the deal with all the pro players.
Yes, yeah, and I think that it's also, it's interesting to see, like Jeff is a really cool and interesting example, because he comes from, he's been working so long in the industry, but he comes from the early '80s with Ricky Lee Jones and with Ray Charles and all that kind of stuff, man. And so he's got a perspective on sound and tone live and in the studio. And I just did a bunch of stuff with Dean Parks and Michael Thompson, and and it's like it's interesting to talk to Dean about tone and those things, because you realize that it's like for Dean and those cats, a lot of it is about they have a knowledge, but it's kind of getting it done. It's like knowing that, like we did a thing in Vegas. Was it Vegas? Sure, we are in Vegas.
In any city, it doesn't matter.
I can't remember where we were. Yeah, and it was literally me, Dean, and Michael Thompson, Phoenix, and Michael Thompson. And Dean was just playing dobro, banjo, and pedal steel. But it's always wild because I get so much in sitting down with those guys and finding out kind of where they come from. But Dean always has like the wildest assortment of gear, but he just knows how to get it to sound right, to make it work.
It's crazy. You and I have a special thing with the tones that we come up with.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's great to work with someone who you can just say, "How about this?"
Yes.
And they go, "Oh yeah, that's it."
Yeah.
And sometimes that always doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But with you, it's a special thing.
Well, and vice versa, because I think that one of the reasons I think we work so well together is we both have a commitment to tone and whatnot. But also, I know that as crazy as I can be, and I can be crazy, I know you're actually crazier than me. So I know that,
I actually let it happen. What it is, or encourage it sometimes even.
Well, even like as we're talking about with the acoustic stuff, it's like we know what an acoustic is supposed to sound like.
Right.
So we're trying to narrow in closer and closer to making it the best it can. So when you're sending me emails going, "What if we tried these mic pre's and let's go this?" and we both have a concept, and I don't know the technical way of making some of it work. I know what I might want to try or what I'm going for, or like the amps and microphones and studio techniques. But when it gets to like caps and resistors and cables and impedance, I'm kind of like, "Pops." There
was one time I was a bit embarrassed when we were in rehearsal and we were trying to make a latch function work on on your Bradshaw rig, and it was a control function. And I got to tell you, for the life of me, I couldn't figure it out. And it was like, "Hey T, I'll be right with you."
Yeah.
"Hey T, I'll be right with you." And it went by like 2 hours.
Right. Yeah.
And I go, "Oh, maybe we should call somebody." Right. And it was at 10 o'clock at night. And by the time you made the call, I'd figured it out.
Right.
And I'm thinking to myself, this is the worst, because really, if I can't figure it out, I don't know. I'm like kind of the end of the road. We're going to have to call Bob at midnight or something.
But I have to say, from my experience, you're one of the few guys that actually has that mindset. Like, actually, can be the end of the road.
Backstreet Boys.
You know, like, okay, so I'm doing this Backstreet tour. I come in for the first day, and this is like back when we're selling, 8 million records and all this kind of madness. Remember those days? And I had like a giant rack. Like I think I had like a 26 space rack daisy chain to like power amps and all this kind of madness. And the tech is walking in with my two VHT 112s, and he goes, "These are cool. What are these?" And I was like, "Yeah, this isn't going to work." I was like, "If you don't know what a 112 cabinet is, this isn't going to work."
I'm glad you brought up the Backstreet Boys.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to talk to you about how your sounds evolved over the years, and I wanted to make a point of that with the huge rack, the refrigerator rack. And I don't know what you had. You had power amps, probably had VHT power amps or something.
I think I had VHT power amp and a backup VHT, and I was slaving 2 heads and had a preamp and all the digital effects and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and I think I had 2 112s underneath me and 412 behind me. So yeah, none of the audience ever heard it.
But it was a thing. Yeah, that's another thing. It's like Christina Aguilera. Right?
Exactly.
Is the guitars out there? Nah, probably not. It sounds great in the ears, though.
Yeah, exactly.
But at that time, that was the rig.
Yes,
it was a Bradshaw stereo rig.
Yes,
with a center dry cabinet.
Yes.
And
yes.
And that center dry, I guess, was actually there for tone. But I personally think it was in case something failed. You had something working.
Well, I have a weird take on wet, dry, wet stuff because, 2 things. Let me say that so that rig, because you were asking about the evolution of the rig, and it started off with kind of this, with the stereo, the typical kind of 80s, 90s stereo rig, turned into a wet, dry, wet system. And I might have gone back to stereo on that same tour. And then I started sizing down because I realized that like I could do a lot more with a lot less. And it started to evolve into kind of what it is today, which is, the rack that we use is a smaller, like 8-space rack that's got a pedal drawer. So I can get kind of organic, kind of gain-based stuff.
Right.
And then it hits the amp, gets mic'd, goes through the mic pre's and goes stereo out with just wet signal to the front of house. And one of the reasons I chose to do that was I was like, okay, A, if I'm going in-ears, do I actually need those additional speakers? B, if I'm using the additional speakers, then now I'm getting my reverbs, delays, all that stuff going through a 112 speaker, going through a 57, versus just being the pristine sound of capturing the amp going through and then going, like for instance, if I would either have to tap a signal and then go through and then kind of amplify it and then mic that, or if I get the whole sound of the amp, then it's almost like being in the studio, where now I've got the amp mic and I'm just adding ambience on the side of it.
Right.
The problem with the wet, dry, wet thing that I found is you have to have a really good control over it because you have to trust your front of house engineer because he now has control of how much ambience, and what it's actually going to sound like to the listener.
Right.
And I also feel like, I have a weird take on mono versus stereo in that setting because you think about how it's being amplified in the front of house and how many of those people are really perceiving it in stereo.
Right.
Because fundamentally, if you're, stage right, up in the bleachers, you're only getting that what would be audience left speaker. So it's like, are you only getting those delays and then kind of getting those quarter note delays from over here? So I have a weird kind of take on that. But I also felt like with wet, dry, wet, the cool thing is conceivably my dry speaker gets to be mono. And that means I get to I'm only really fighting the kick drum, bass guitar, vocals and not ambience. Right. And I have a lot more space to be that mono organic thing. And then I'm shooting my effects maybe 10 and 2. So I still get that ambience, but I still get that big mono thing. So that became kind of a bit more of my mindset, probably for the past maybe, 5 or 6 or 10 years or something like
that. Let's explain a little bit more in detail to the listeners, because what you're doing is very creative with the mic, the 57 or whatever, the Royers or whatever we're using at the time, whatever. We generally use a cardioid dynamic and some type of condenser on that, which we split. But I'm pretty sure we use the 57 and then that feeds the rack. So we come into an Apex.
Yes, mic pre.
And then that feeds the effects. So instead of the guitar hitting the effects, the actual analog signal from the amplifier is feeding the effects.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Well, and I kind of stole the idea. I mean, guys started doing something like that because it started off with using rack mount preamps and power amps where just the preamp would go through all the effects, stereo power amp to 2 speakers. You know, I know you know this. I'm explaining for listeners.
Yeah.
You know, stereo left and right.
Right.
Then it turned into this idea that I think Dean Parks may have kind of been one of the first guys to have this idea, which was, you know what I'm really wanting to do is capture the entire sound of that rig, of that, Marshall or whatever it is. And I wanted to add ambience onto it, like in the studio. Like, for instance, if we're in the studio and I have a great, like, old Tweed Deluxe and we crank it up and it sounds great, we mic that bad boy. And then what I'll probably want to do is add reverb and delays in order to make it stereo. And it's the same idea. And guys started using it with stereo wet, dry, wet cabinets, like Landau and like Lukather and Van Halen, like in the later kind of mid-90s and all that stuff. And I just wanted to make it a little more compact. And I do come from, like you, a bit more of kind of a 70s mindset in terms of what constitutes good, solid tone. So I wanted to capture that and be able to hit it with like a tube screamer, or be able to hit it with like an old Dynacomp and capture that and then throw my 90s effects on if I need it and shoot it wide. So I'm doing the Bette Midler gig right now, and 90% of our show, I'm kind of mono mic.
Right.
But when we get into Wind Beneath My Wings and From a Distance and some of the more pop stuff, I get to suddenly be shiny, happy 90s.
Delays all over the place.
Yeah. And so the idea is, as you were saying, is taking that microphone and actually taking that mic signal and splitting it so I've got a dry signal going to the board and having it hit my effects and 100% wet left and right. So literally in the left and right speakers, you're just getting the ambience from the reverbs and delays. And the newest thing I've been doing is actually using a Royer 121 and just splitting that mono microphone so I don't have to deal with any phase stuff. Because the other thing I was struggling with a little bit with the audio guys is they've got so much stuff to do during the day, the last thing they want to do is chase phase. Right. And once you start throwing more than one microphone, suddenly you're chasing phase down. And the Royer gets such a great image. We just started taking that and like splitting it. And that way I can get it, and I know it's just the same mic. I don't have to worry about phase issues and all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah,
that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Well, since I've been with you, we've gone through different amps.
Mm-hmm.
And, I know you're a Marshall guy. You like Marshalls. You like Matchless. I was telling Jeff that, we were going to use Matchless on the 2013 tour.
Yeah.
Because Tim Pierce had done a bunch of the tracks.
Yeah.
On the record, and there were matchless tones, and you wanted to do that, and then. We kind of talked about, well, they're hard to get. We called Phil at Matchless and all that. So decided on the Fender Deluxe, and now you're sticking with that.
Yeah, and that has been a really cool, like I said to you earlier today, I've debated about actually going down a size to the Princeton, because I actually I've gotten to the point where I like amps with less knobs, because I have this mindset where I'm like, it's good and more.
Right.
So the two amps that come out the most for me are my Deluxe and my Tweed Deluxe. Where, and sometimes both together, because to me it's a great solid bass for a tone, and then I can slam it with some boosts or overdrives or whatever. And like you and I found, like it was actually a bigger sound than when I had, 3 different amp heads, going into an ISO cabinet off the side of the stage.
Oh yeah.
And once again, you and I together have been through.
Yeah.
I mean, we had Divided by 13s out with Christina and
Bradshaw, custom audio electronics.
Yeah, we had the whole the Friedman rig that was built. Yep. We had I think I had my Bogner out with us or something.
We had a Bogner at one time. We had a Shiva. We had
that's right.
We had Blankenships. Yeah, we've been through a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and now it's a Deluxe.
You know what though? It sounds amazing.
It sounds amazing, and I got to give props. I love Roy Blankenship, and he actually built the Deluxe. My number one, he built it from the ground up, and also my Tweed Deluxe. But I found that that for me is such a great solid. Like, how do you beat a Deluxe that's cranking? And like a 335 or a Les Paul, it's like that's a good day.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
So at home now, you have a spot at the studio in Santa Barbara, and what's the studio called again?
Well, I was a playback recording studio, and I had a room there that I call the Road Weary room. As we all are.
That's right.
And so in there, I've got all my heads and amplifiers and all that stuff, and actually, I have. It's a similar vibe to my touring rack. It's just larger with more pieces. Right. But the basic idea is, even when I would do studio sessions, I would have someone just run me a line from the 57, and then it goes through my mic pre's, through my rig, stereo to the board.
Yeah, right.
So I typically have like a lunchbox with either API mic pre's or Neve-based stuff, or I had some Chandler stuff that I was using. Yeah. And then, and it's basically the same idea, which was, if I'm in Capitol and it's like Al Schmidt or something like that, man, I know he's got it. I'm not scared. But a lot of times you're working with people you don't know, and I know what I'm going for. I know what mic pre's I like. I know where I want to put the microphone. I mean, like, you and I know where on the cone the microphone's supposed to go to like capture what we want. And so I'll typically do a lot of it myself. And if they're cool with it, we go. Like Jeff and I just did a session together in Atlanta where it was just a day off that we had, and we went in with some of the guys. I don't know if he told you about it. We went with some of the guys from the band, and we just carved, and we just used house amps. And and all they had for me was a 414. I was like, all right. So I took the 414, and I knew I wanted on the speaker, and it wasn't even my amp.
Right.
A little off axis because I knew I wanted to shave off a little bit of that, peaky, high end.
Yep.
And it was a great day, and I actually just brought a guitar and used some of his pedals and got a great grind sound and great clean stuff, and it's a great day.
I played you a track earlier today that I did. Yeah. Carl Popek and I are doing this series, Talkin Tone on amps, and man, I'm using no overdrive, nothing.
Yeah,
just guitar and amp.
Yeah,
straight up.
Well, and I think one of the things that I find fascinating, one of the things you're doing, I think is fantastic. Also, is I think people get caught up in this mindset, like just talking about the listener, and there's all this gradation of like of how much money, how much time, how much yada yada yada. But man, you can get so much out of a 57 and a Celestion, and it's like, and just with mic placement, just with where do you put it, and like and just that going to tape is gonna to tape. You know what I'm saying?
I still say let's make a record.
Exactly.
Because we are, right?
Yeah.
And we're rolling, and it's going to tape, I think, but it's going to a hard drive.
Yeah.
Now, but I would love to see it go to tape again.
Well, and that's a whole other thing. I think when it goes to tape, one of the cool things about tape, and people are now trying to do it on the backside, even with like the Steven Slate plugins and all that stuff,
right?
Tape emulation. Right. But one of the cool things is it's about saturation.
You can't musically saturate a hard drive.
Dig it.
It's 1 or 0. It's off or on. There's no musical distortion.
Dig it. Well, even like when you're going in the mix process and you're going through your tracks, there are all these plugins you can get now to like add a certain level of saturation, and it's part of what adds that character.
Right.
So my thing now with recording is it's about character, like not just the character of the part, but the character of the tone. Right. Like that stuff we remember, like when you were playing me the track earlier, and it's like, man, that's a really cool and unique guitar tone. And so and you remember the riff, but you also remember the sound. And we've kind of gotten away from that because everyone's got 1,000 plugins, but doesn't really know what, an amp sounds like.
Yeah, right. Well, that's what we're trying to bring back. That's why we're doing these sessions. And really, we want the younger audience, the up and coming cats to,
absolutely,
to get an ear for it and hear what it should sound like, and that's not acquired overnight. That's something that takes time. You have to kind of figure that out.
And you have to tune your ear. You have to actually like I remember a buddy of mine used to have a PV Bandit, and he finally got like a Mesa Boogie like Mark IV, and he hated it because he was so used to the PV Bandit's tone.
Right. Yeah, right.
But it's like, you know what? You wind up having to tune your ear. And to me, you can actually get I think it's the Fender like Blues Junior. Like there's a small little amplifier with like maybe 10 watts, something like that.
Right.
But if you put the right tubes in, man, that thing can scream. And you start getting used to how does it interact with your hands. And to me, it's also the alchemy of tubes, heat, cables. I mean, like when we're talking about, we're talking about capacitance and all that kind of stuff.
Carl has some 8412, the brown 8412. And now I have several hundred feet of 8412 out there that I've owned since 1974.
Yes.
And I'm Michael Bernard. I was talking to Michael Bernard when I first was putting the studio together, and I said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to get these tones and this. And I said, I even have some old 8412. It still works. And he goes, you're not gonna, are you? And I said, I may. I probably will. Yes. And I'm probably going to do a whole test on the capacitance. And I'm a big Megami fan as well as you are. Canary, I use Canary as well.
Yeah.
And, I'm doing long runs here in my studio. I do 40, 50 feet,
Well, we were doing 50 feet back to my amp when we were doing the orchestra tour,
That's it, So, we want to express to the young kids how to move around a mic. I was talking to Jeff about how you and you were saying about mic placement when you might walk in one day and go, hey man, has something changed? Well, what sounds weird? I don't know quite yet. And I'll go back to the amp and just move the microphone maybe an eighth, quarter of an inch. And then, that's it.
Absolutely. Well, and I think the other thing about it that I think is really important to remember is first of all, when using 57, you're talking about the size of a nickel, maybe a quarter, and that's actually picking up, 100% of your sound. So part of what you're trying to figure out is where is it, not only where is it capturing the speaker, but you're also trying to create an image so that the person out there, because you're thinking to yourself, it's going from a 12-inch speaker, which is, magnet, that's like shaking back and forth, into a microphone, through feet of cable, into a snake, through more feet of cable, going to like a splitter, then it's got to get, biamp, it's going to, so you're really trying to create an image, and same thing in the studio. You're trying to create an image that translates as big guitar. So it doesn't have to be a giant amp to be a giant amp sound, but also like you're trying to figure out where you're going to capture the best representation of that's going to translate.
So I was talking to Carl Popek about actually doing, and I talked to Phil, the Mogami distributor over in Los Angeles, about doing this, about putting something to bed with cabling, where I'm going to take a 25-foot piece of Mogami cable, and I'm going to run frequencies through it at a certain level, decibel level, and I'm going to measure it at the other end.
Yeah.
And I'm going to see what happens. I'm going to put this to bed finally. And so Carl says, well, sometimes it's not what's on the meter. And I go, here we go. The debate, this debate is going to continue on. When I was doing all the studio work in Los Angeles, and I would go into these producers when Monster Cable first came out, and it had arrows on it, and you had to plug it in a certain way. And I'm like going, let me tell you something. A 16-year-old kid in his Volkswagen's not going to hear that arrow. And I got to tell you, I don't think I can hear it.
Yes.
Right now in the studio.
Well, and I got to say, it's like, we don't always agree with that, because but at the same time, there's a part of me that goes, listen, what we're going, like, there's a part of me that goes, Joe Walsh was not concerned with that. And that motherfucker got great tone.
Rocky Mountain Way. He probably had that 8412. Who still uses the 8412 is Neil Young.
Oh, yeah.
Got to use the Brown 8412. Or 8410 maybe it is.
But that's part of my thing, which is at the end of the day, all of these are cogs in the wheel of making music and creating something. And we have more understanding of it now. And there's also a part of it where, to me, guys like you and guys like me and guys like Jeff and Carl, it's like we're passing on a certain amount of, hands-on knowledge, of all this stuff. I'm going to take it off. Hands-on knowledge with all that kind of stuff. And I think that it's something that's hard to, you can't get that from a plugin. What I mean? And I'm not trying to diss plugins.
Yeah, I'm not either. No. I think the plugins are great. Yeah. I personally only tried them a couple times, and that was it. But
I think at the end of the day, in order for, and this is, I'm going to get into a little bit of weird hoobie-gooby stuff, and I apologize. Yeah, it's part of having moved to Santa Barbara. But
you're not from Santa Barbara.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Exactly. You can't.
Nothing against that. I'm all good with everything. I'm not even going to go there. But
exactly.
Anyway.
No, but I think there's a part of it that's like, music is art. And to me, art exists in an analog mindset, an analog medium. And I mean that in the sense that it exists beyond ones and zeros. It exists in a place where, I think that we can capture some of it, or we can try to emulate some of it. But at the end of the day, you're emulating something. And there's something about the alchemy of a gauge of string, hot tubes, a speaker working hard, all that kind of stuff that you try to capture with the microphone in order to like create that kind of moment. So that's why I kind of lean in that direction. I don't think it means that you can't create art with ones and zeros. I'm just saying that it's part of what facilitates art. And there's art in the what amp are you using, what cables are you using, what tubes are you using, and to me it's like as you and I talk about, or you talk about icons like the Neil Youngs and the Joe Walshes, and you talk about you talk about the Mike Campbells, and you talk about these people, that there's a mystique to what they're doing, but also it does translate. Like it gives you chills. So you hear like a guitar tone come through, and you're scared.
Absolutely. Hendrix.
Yeah. When I said to a friend of mine, I said, okay, with all the equipment we have today, what was the last guitar tone you felt like, or guitar part you felt like you had to learn? Let alone last guitar tone that made you sit up and go, "What the hell is that?" You know what I mean? And maybe Jack White, maybe something like that. And those guys are going back to
sure.
So and that's, once again, it's my take on it. But I think that one of the things that's also going to separate this younger generation from their peers is that understanding and knowledge. And once again, you can get a 57 for $100, and you can also hammer nails in then mic up your cabinet. Be ready
You can get them for $82 at Guitar Center. I know for a fact.
$82.
I'm the king of trying to find great deals,
dude. $82.
I know.
Yeah.
A 57.
Yeah, and it's an industry standard. And first of all, yes, there are other mics that are great, but if you can't get it, if you can't capture it with a 57 on a Celestian, something's wrong. Right. Like something's wrong with your rig or your system or your chain or whatever. You should be able to get it. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I just got to tell you, I know we're short of time, and just for everyone out there, this will be an ongoing series with you and I. This is going to continue on, hopefully, with our next Josh Groban tour. Hopefully, with all the powers that be approve it, that you and I can continue on doing a technical series, and maybe even over Skype. If I can't get you for sure. Yes. And I just want to tell you, thank you so much.
My pleasure, man. Always good to see you.
It's great to hang alone, but now we can do these interview things.
Yeah,
and I think it's going to be a really great series.
Well, I love it, and I thank you for inviting me. And for me, I'm passionate about education, and I honestly do feel like, what we do and what we have is really precious. And I think that it's like, in order to kind of maintain and sustain it, we have to reach back out and make sure that these kids that are coming up have a chance to really know this, learn this, and grow from these experiences. And I mean, once again, we're, it's not that it's hard to find us, but it's like typically you and I are together. So
yeah, right. But we could sit here tonight and talk till tomorrow.
Yeah,
I mean, you and I never could stop talking.
Oh yeah, and if you see a bottle of wine here, it's never going to end.
You know what? I really thought it was great. I watched Letterman, not the last night, but the night before, and Bill Murray came on.
Oh.
And he goes, I just wanted to promote something from my buddy. And he pulled out a bottle of vodka. And he pulled it open and started to chug it and set it down to Dave and went, come on, Dave.
Oh, come on.
Cannonball. Right on the show. And I'm going, that's right. Everyone's too uptight with everything now, across the board. Let's get back to, there you go, right in the middle of the show.
Absolutely.
Hey, yeah, who cares?
Well, yeah.
Screw you, CBS. I'm leaving tomorrow. What are you going to do?
Well, and to me, it's about life, man. It's like, like we were talking earlier, it's like life is for the living.
Absolutely.
What I mean? And it's like, and to me, these are things that highlight and accentuate life. And I honestly believe that in terms of culture, it's like you got food, you got music, you got dance. You know what I mean? And so it's like, why not enjoy it, get as deep into it as you can, and get the most out of it.
Not that I condone drug and alcohol use.
I thought you were going to say you don't condone dancing.
Well, I like to dance as well, but generally when I'm doing drugs and alcohol. Not that I do drugs anymore. I was telling you before in the kitchen, it's down to water.
Right, exactly. Yes. Now
but it's just a sad state of affairs.
Well, I love the fact that now we're talking about our conversations are typically what vitamins and water and eating well and all that
juice and nuts.
Absolutely.
And, what happened to a good old stay out all night, stumble, puke, and come to work stinking of booze. The good old days of music business. Now it's like, didn't you get the memo? And the best one is, have any issues getting into Canada? Oh, me? No.
Man, we were just talking about that with somebody that had something in London, and it followed him around. Long story.
Like London doesn't care what you got.
No.
But 2 goats and a sheep, and no worries. Come on in. We love those kind of guys.
Sheep or
yeah, right. Yeah. Well, what about that night? 2 goats and a sheep. Got a guy at the Canadian border's going, oh, you can't come in here.
And now I think that's a great band name. 2 Goats and a Sheep.
That's a 9-year Woldridge, my buddy. Yeah. He's always got the goat and the sheep stories. I'm going to get him on one as well. And he goes back to Bay Area with Neil Schoen.
Oh,
when Neil was first got in Santana, he's got all those stories. I mean, just he was with Dr. Hook when the cover of the Rolling Stone days.
And,
oh my God, he's got some stories. But he was a bass player back, Midnight Special and all.
Yeah. Well, man, listen, you can call me anytime. I would absolutely love to. Whatever you need, I got your back.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, my brother.
Absolutely,
and we'll carry this on. This is not the end, only the beginning.
Absolutely.
Thank you, man.
Sure. Yep.